Hello everybody and welcome to video 17 of my 30-day challenge. Now this is the third and final part for the Ferris wheel, and in this part we're going to be bringing in the cabin and attaching it to the Ferris wheel and animating the Ferris wheel. Now the first thing we're going to be doing is bringing in the cabin as a linked object, and the reason we're doing a linked object is because if I ever go back and edit the original file, it will automatically update in this scene. It's really handy if you have a big scene with lots of objects and you may want to tweak an individual object from time to time. And instead of having to go in and tweak every single object that you have duplicated in the scene, you can go back to the original file, edit it there, and then it will automatically update in your current scene. So I bring in the linked object, and one thing you have to do when you bring in a linked object is duplicate it, because the linked part you don't actually make any adjustments to. I just leave it on layer 2, duplicate it, and then bring the duplication back into layer 1, and that's where I scale it and I can move it around and tweak it as I see fit. So when I first brought it in, my origin point was kind of off just a little bit, so I reset it to the center and then recentered my object using the locations reset at the top of the transform tab there on the right hand side. Just reset X, Y, and Z to 0 and it will put your object's origin right back in the center of the grid. And then I just brought it up into into the wheel, which I think I was thinking at the time that the cabin was too small. I wanted it to be bigger. So once I scaled the cabin up to the size I wanted, I went in and just adjusted the wheel itself, and I ended up just scaling it up on the X just to widen it a little bit, which it still looked good. I thought it looked fine that way. So then I went through and just was adjusting the location for the cabin and where I wanted it to actually fit along next to the spokes. I wanted one cabin per set of spokes, and it ended up turning out good. Then we're going to go in and add rigid body components to the wheel and to the cabin. Now the wheel component, you want to make sure you click that animated check mark there on under your component, because we're going to actually animate the wheel itself, while the cabin is going to be using the physics engine to actually control its animation. Now one thing you want to make sure you remember to do is reset your location, rotation, and scale. If those are not reset, make sure you do that. If you're not, things act funny and they don't quite do the way you want it, it can cause all kinds of headaches, and then you have to figure out, oh, my rotation is all screwed up. So once you select the wheel and then shift select the cabin to get them together, the physics tab on the left, click constraints connect, and then we're going to set it to hinge and then the location to active. Now what this does, it brings in a constraint, which is an X, Y, and Z coordinate, and it has an origin point. So you bring that origin point to where you want your object to actually pivot during the hinge. Now I currently already knew that I needed to rotate my constraint 90 degrees on the Y because I'd practiced already. But depending on how you build your object and the orientation of your objects and which direction you want your hinge to pivot, you may have to adjust those particular rotations. So just play around that a little bit and you should be fine. Now remember to set your rigid body cache up high enough to complete your entire animation. If not, the physics engine will only render to whatever frames you have set in your cache. So I set my first iframe for the wheel and set its keyframe rotation, and then I moved to frame 60, and what I'm going to be doing is rotating the wheel how far I want it to rotate within the first second, since I'm doing 60 frames per second on my animation. Once I get it to where I want it, and I want it to go fairly slow, so I didn't move it very far. So once I got that, you just set your keyframe for your rotation, and then I just hit play. That way I could see exactly how far it was moving. Now you don't have to do any more than that when you want something to continually rotate in a circle. What you do is you go into your graph editor, and then you hit Shift and E, and that will bring up your interpolation and pick linear interpolation or extrapolation. Some weird word I have a hard time pronouncing. Then when you hit play, it will actually continue what your animation was, and it will just continue to rotate in a circle. I'm sure it works for other things, but the rotation is the only one that I'm currently aware of that it works for. And as you can see, the cabin reacts with the physics on its own since it is an active object as the wheel spins. Now I let this entire rotation finish because I wanted to see what frame I was going to end up on at the very end of the animation. And what I wanted to do was make sure that my last frame of my animation was just before the very first frame of the animation. And when you get this lined up correctly, it will keep the animation from jumping or skipping or having that little pause and different little things you could get in there. And you'll see me, I take this part right here and jump back and forth between first frame and last frame until I and adjust it and see what I want to do and see if it works. Now I'm using the left arrow key to back my animation up one frame at a time and then get that set to where I want it. Now unfortunately at this part I hadn't figured out that you could just hit the last frame and then hold back to like, I don't know, a second or so, and then play your animation from there and see how it goes from the end of the animation to the beginning. So I sat here for the entire animation and watched it go around in this really slow pace until it got to the end, just so that I could see if it skipped at the end. Luckily, after I did this one time, I figured out that I could do it easier and I didn't have to sit through this entire thing again. But if you get right here at the end, you'll see it. It'll pop. Whoop. It's really slight because I got really close on my first attempt, but there's just a very slight pop and I could see it. So I just go back and I start adjusting it again. Just frame one, last frame, first frame, last frame, first frame, last frame, and then I just back it up just a little bit and get to where I think it needs to go, and then hit play. And then I'm trying to check to see if I still see that little skip. And what you got to do is just remember to set the end frame. This is where I figured out that I could just back it up a little bit. And you see it pop. It's very slight at this point because I got really close, but I could notice it. And at this point I just start playing with it again and I'm like, alright, let's change the end frame just slightly more. And now this one I think I actually made it worse. Yeah, it's quite a bit bigger at that point. So I just continue to make adjustments for it. And I actually had to pull it forward just a little bit because I'd gone a little too far back. And once I got it lined up, you'll see I play with it, and that skip basically is gone. Right? Yep, it just jumps right back to the original beginning of the animation, and you just see the cabin swing. I was really happy with that it didn't skip. So from there, I was done with the actual animation portion of it. Now all I had to do was go through, duplicate my cabin, and then place them around the wheel. And right here I'm just trying to figure out exactly how many spaces I need to go up to line it up along the wheel. It ended up being like 20.57 something. I just put it 20.5. I got close to where it wanted to go, and then I just zoomed in at the top and manually adjusted it to get it exactly where I wanted to make it fit, just so that it looked even for me. And I wanted to just make sure every single cabin was lined up exactly where it needed to. So I was going to try an easy way to do it. I thought, okay, so I'm used to doing poles or different things for chairs and fences. Let me just grab both of these objects, rotate them a little bit to pivot them, and then it will line up with the next wheel or the next spoke in the wheel. Well, it doesn't work so well when your objects have to stay in a certain orientation. So I grabbed them and I tried to rotate them and they were twisting. I'm like, alright, well let me change the pivot point. How will that work? So I set the orientation to the median point. As you can see, it doesn't quite work so well because the objects maintain an orientation for rotation, so they weren't going to sit right on the Ferris wheel, which I guess I could have gone in and manually adjusted the rotation to get them to hang straight up and down, but I thought it would be easier just to duplicate them in the up and down orientation and then move them individually into the spokes. So once I got the first 3 on the right side set up, it became much easier to duplicate multiple objects because their orientation was the same and that since the spoke for the wheels are exactly even all the way around, they would be the same distance apart on the right side and on the left side just by rotating them around. Then I can grab 2, 3, and 4, duplicate them, and I'm going to try and rotate them on the Z-axis. I thought there was a shortcut way to make them automatically flip exactly 180, but I was doing it wrong. I wasn't remembering the shortcut correctly. So eventually what I do is just drag them all the way across and then rotate them 180 degrees around the Z-axis. So I'm just going to speed this part up and just go through and place all of the cabins around the wheel where I want them to fit. So once you have all the cabins where you want them to be on the Ferris wheel, then it's a matter of just going through and creating all of your constraints and make sure that every single cabin is set to the same constraint on the Ferris wheel where it needs to be set. So select the Ferris wheel, select the cabin, go to your physics tab, under constraints, click connect, and then adjust your hinge where you need it to, because every one of them will need to be adjusted because every one of them comes in exactly the same way. It doesn't remember orientation. Once they're all in place and every one of them was set up, all I had to do was hit play and everything worked together. I was super happy at this point because at any point if I had done something wrong, out of order, or forgot a step, they could have flown off to all existence or could have fell crashing to the ground, which would have made for a really scary Ferris wheel ride. But thank you for watching. I hope you learned something or at least enjoyed watching me learn as I put this project together. I got the idea for the Ferris wheel probably about a week ago, and I really enjoyed researching and figuring how to get the physics to work together, get things to attach together, getting the hinges to swing correctly. And I practiced a few times before I put the video together, and I was real happy with the outcome. I'm looking forward to the rest of the month and trying to come up with new ideas and new projects. If you have an idea for something you'd like to see me put together or build or learn a specific aspect, please leave it in the comments below. I do look forward, and I kind of need some ideas for the rest of the month. I have some ideas, but some of them are a little plain. So if you have any ideas, please let me know. If you like this video, please hit the like button, please subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing y'all in the next episode.